Here's a podcast on alcoholism and addiction. This podcast would cover questions that are related to a recovering individual, a loved one with alcoholism or alcohol addiction, a well-wisher to a person with alcoholism or alcohol addiction. The reason we've put out this podcast and come up with a comprehensive conversation is largely to address the myths, the confusion, the treatment options that surround alcohol addiction and alcoholism. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kadabam's podcast series. I have with me Dr. Sunil, the director with a senior leadership role at Kadabam's group. I'm myself, Sandesh Kadabam, the managing director of Kadabam's group. Here we are as colleagues from the leadership roles to have this conversation which would cover the whole range of topics to alcoholism, alcohol addiction, the most sought after service, or one of the most sought after service at our centers, treatment options, the whole gamut of recovery, and how does one see through recovery, post-treatment, and reintegration. Hi, Dr. Sunil.
Hi.
I would keep this conversation to start with really where alcoholism stands and what alcoholism really is, doctor. And probably from there, we would take it down into various sections.
Wonderful. I really hope this conversation that we are having today helps people understand what the problems are and also helps them take the right steps at the right time. So we are talking about alcoholism. Is there something called alcoholism at all? From a clinical or purely from a medical point of view, there is nothing called isms. Okay, but as common man, we do generally talk about alcoholism. What do people mean when they say alcoholism? They are meaning that there is a problem with alcohol. Is it that alcohol itself a problem? No. From a medical point of view, we have to understand when they are talking about alcoholism, we are talking about three different stages or three different levels. Right. The first one is alcohol use, which many of them, and as per the latest understandings or the studies that is done across the country, we are talking about almost 12 to 13%. That's wow. 12 to 13 crore Indians who are using alcohol. That's the first thing. Second is alcohol abuse or harmful problems. These are people who, because of taking alcohol, have developed problems. One, at their physical level. Second, at their psychological level, or their education, their occupation, multiple domains of their life. They have developed problems because of taking alcohol, but they do not recognize it. It is the families who think that they have got problem. And when they say that he has problem or you are having problem, the person is not able to understand, he continues to take alcohol. And that is the second stage, which we call it as abuse or harmful use. And the medical problem, that is the last stage, which is generally considered as alcoholism or alcoholic. When somebody is called, it is actually the alcohol dependent syndrome. Right. This is a condition, this is purely a medical condition like a diabetes or hypertension, where this individual has developed tolerance for alcohol. The dosage or the amount of alcohol that he used to take earlier no more suffices at this particular stage. He needs to take more and more alcohol to have the same elated or the kick that is generally the word that is used. Second, they have withdrawals when they stop taking alcohol. That is, right. When they stop taking alcohol, they might develop tremors, sweating, and other problems because of abrupt stop. And some of the withdrawal symptoms can be very complicated as well. So when we are talking about alcoholism, it is generally the alcohol dependent syndrome, which is a medical problem that we are addressing, which is almost 1 to 2% of our population. We are looking at 1.2 to 2 crore Indians who are having this alcohol dependent syndrome.
When does an individual ideally identify himself or their loved one to say that they've moved from various stages? I think this question is asked to both of us. So, how do we know that they've slipped away from a casual drinker or a social drinker to that of a dependent user or finally an alcohol dependent syndrome? What would those key indicators be?
It is very difficult for a family member to recognize their individual, their family, their loved ones, which stage are they in. This is purely a medical diagnosis, medical understanding, that when a team of professionals, when they interact, when they do assessment, they get to know if he is in that harmful use or an abuse, that the stage that he is in, or he has moved into a dependent pattern. But broadly speaking, for a family member to understand, for them to know if this individual, my loved one, is dependent user, as I earlier said, one, the tolerance levels for the alcohol has gone up. Right. Something which I was able to get the same kick for a 1 quarter or 2 quarter, now I might need an entire bottle, to have the same kind of a, feeling. That is one. Second is the withdrawals, which is the most prominent one that we see. And third one, of course, is the physical health issues that they develop over a period of time because of abusing alcohol.
Right. So there would be an indicative effect on the activities of daily living, be it the sleep pattern, their social setting, and would there be some indication? Because I'm sure the viewers would have experienced directly or have seen that happening with their loved ones, or sometimes that can get camouflaged and that can all actually be normal but still have any underlying issue.
No, absolutely. People who either are in the abusive stage or who are dependent users, they will have problems in the various domains of their life. First is the physical part of it, but here again it's a very slippery area. Some people who might be abusing alcohol for 20 years, 30 years might have very minimal physical health complications, which gives them the confidence to continue to take alcohol, though they are dependent users. For some people, we do see, especially in Cardabums, when we are treating these people, we do encounter many of them at a very, very young age developing a lot of physical health complications, be it liver cirrhosis, be it cardiomyopathies, that is irreversible stages of the heart. All those things they would have developed for abusing the alcohol for a very shorter period of time. One is the physical domain. Second one is their own psychological domain. That is loss of confidence levels, loss of, or reduced self-esteem, and them giving up on their habit that, it is no more under my control and I cannot manage this, and blaming somebody else for the problem that they are going through. Lot of psychological issues also develops over a period of time. Their occupation, there are people, whom we see, they themselves being professionals, they themselves being doctors, have taken alcohol and gone to a clinic, which we encounter. We have had, we had an anesthetist who came, who was not able to give anesthesia in the operation theater because he had developed neuropathy secondary to taking alcohol. That is, his nerves had become weak because of taking alcohol. So that is when he realized that it's no more under my control, I need to take treatment, and he approached us. So the psychological part of it has again various issues, various domains, various further issues that they develop. Occupational level, as I was saying, and the social or the interpersonal issues that they develop. Many a times interpersonal issues itself can contribute to the alcohol problem, and because of having alcohol problem, there can be a lot of interpersonal issues at the family level. So it is not one, it is multiple areas that the individual has problems with.
Right. So I think in this part of our conversation gets to, this certainly affects the individual and it also affects the family members. Now, what is the effect on the family member, and where do we see professionals play a role in helping the individual and their family in this whole issue of alcoholism and largely alcohol addiction syndrome, the ADS?
Alcoholism along with majority of the mental health issues or any other psychological problems, as much a person who is having the problem suffers, equally the family also suffers because of this psychological or alcohol related issues. It is a two-way traffic, if we have to say. When we say two-way traffic, this person who is taking alcohol, because he is taking alcohol, he behaves in a particular way at home. He is not able to take up the responsibilities that he is supposed to. Even if he is a son who is not an earning member, he has some responsibilities. If it's a spouse, he has a different kind of a responsibility. So he is not able to fulfill the roles of himself being in that particular family as a structure. So that leads to a lot of issues and conflicts. Third, family members not knowing how to deal with this individual would have commented, would have spoken, would have said things which would have made the whole relationship a lot more sour. So when that itself becomes a problem, the person goes back and takes alcohol because the relationship has been soured, and they blame the family member.
Isn't it but more evident for each one to blame the other?
Absolutely.
Now, is blaming okay, not okay? When do they withdraw? Or, I know it's a very generic question.
No, blaming is an indication that the person has not taken up the responsibility for the problem that he is going through. He is
But why should the family take the blame?
Family need not take the blame, but family is also responsible for the recovery of that particular individual. Okay. They need to understand that it's a medical problem. It is, if somebody is suffering from fever, the family cannot just sit and blame the individual that why did you get the fever? Okay, he has got the fever for whatever the reason, and they have the responsibility of helping that individual. And the person also should be ready to take the help.
That's interesting. Now, let's get to the signs of where the treatment starts, the stages of treatment options. So I think like we've had a comparative, if this is a medical problem, are there advances in diagnosing, assessing that this individual falls under this bucket? And if so, what should one be aware of to say that here is how there are the starting point for treatment? I mean, we could use the word assessment, or for a family and an individual, it is for me to understand where I stand and what should I expect. And I do understand that there are unorganized treatment options. So what should they be aware of before they start to seek help?
Here, I would like to take it from what we are doing at Cadabums. I think that would be much more relevant. Plus, also, I feel the services that we have is the most comprehensive one, because we are managing a person who has started taking alcohol, or who is in the very, very early stages of alcohol problem, to a person who has a deep-seated problem of alcohol dependence syndrome with series of relapses, or whom medically we call it as a chronic alcohol problem. Though it comes under alcohol use disorder problems. It's a severe problem. We are able to cater to the end, from this end to the other end of the spectrum. When somebody is taking alcohol, as I said, from a user to an abuse or a harmful use to a dependent user, the model of care that we have, or at Cadabums we are having, it's biopsychosocial. All the three domains are equally given importance at every stage, and we have professionals who are addressing this biopsychosocial issues of an individual. The first is the biological part of it. When we say biological part of it, we are looking at the physical domain. That is, why is this person getting into this alcohol problems, and how can we help biologically with medicines, with diagnosis of any associated psychiatric issues which might be contributing for this individual to get into the alcoholism or alcohol use. That is taken care. That's the biological part of it. Second one is the psychological part of it, where we try and understand the personality of this individual. If the way he is coping up with his day-to-day stressors or life situations by compensating with alcohol. If so, how do we deal with it? That's the psychological, the part of it domain which is taken care by the clinical psychologist. The social domain, be it his occupation, his friend circle, the interpersonal issues, or the family issues that he has, all those things are dealt by the family therapists or psychiatric social workers. Coming back to the different stages or different services that is necessary for these people who are going through alcohol problems. First is this that they have to get admitted to a residential or a de-addiction center, which is the most commonly understood or spoken thing, that if there is an alcohol problem, they have to be put into de-addiction center. No, the answer
Doctor, just to stop you there, probably at a stage where when we say that there is a medical, there is a psychological aspect, a social aspect, would there, we do give clarity to the individual who's seeking help, and we do give clarity to the immediate family members who come to seek help. So what should they come with as a mindset, or is there as a professional you expect that the family member and the recovering individual to come with? Is there a role that they play when they start off or even explore that this is when they want to go in for the treatment?
Okay. First thing, the people who are having the problem, one, they do not know that they have got the problem.
Sure.
That itself is one of the major issues, which is the challenge that both professionals as well as the family members have. So
making sure you go to a qualified mental health professional is probably the first step.
Most often not, it is the family members who recognize the problem, and it is they who seek or who approach the mental health professionals, be it psychiatrists or counselors or clinical psychologists, for the treatment options. And when they approach, of course, without the person who is into the problem, him or her being involved in the whole process, there is no way out. How do we involve him is the question, and for that there are professionals and organizations like us.
Interesting. So once a person is assessed, we talk about this whole aspect of programs, which is liberally used, but to be sure that it's an evidence-based program. To me, an evidence-based program is when we answer the 4 W's and 1 H and say what is the why, when, what, where, and how. So what really is the evidence-based program that we refer to? Probably in a gist, and then we'll break up those sections so that it's a little simpler for everybody to follow.
Okay, as the name itself suggests, when we are talking about evidence-based, whatever is done, there is an evidence that this particular way of doing or dealing with things helps the individual.
Right.
Okay. If it is something which I as an individual believe and there is no scientific data to prove that it has got a basis, it can help the individual, then it certainly not becomes an evidence-based. So there are a lot of evidence-based interventions. Again, I go back to the 3 domains that I spoke about. There are evidence-based interventions at the biological level. There are medications which can help in managing the craving, or help the individual manage when they are going through withdrawals, the detoxification that we talk about. So there are biological evidence-based interventions, there are psychological evidence-based interventions, there are social as well. All the 3 put together is what constitutes a program. Right. Okay. So when people are talking about program, my own personal understanding, whenever I have heard, I am not sure, I have not come across, especially in our own country, where There are standards that majority of them are following. Of late, of course, there are centers where they have opened up to the reality, and maybe the involvement of professionals has brought in a lot of changes there in the de-addiction space. There are, program-based interventions that are, coming up. But I'm very confident, or probably I'm very proud to say that we as an organization, when the entire de-addiction as the space or speciality was in its very, very nascent stage or earlier stages, say 10 years back, when people were only talking about putting somebody in a de-addiction center and talking about just the 12 steps or locking them up for 90 days or 100 days.
Right.
We were fortunate enough to have professionals, people, and also as an organization, we were very open to look at what were the evidence-based interventions that were available. And from the past 10 years, we have been evolving, and we are evolving. I think we will continue to kind of be open to the newer evidence-based interventions that is available. It is not that all evidence-based interventions will be helpful to the individual. I mean, everybody is going to benefit. It also depends upon how we are able to adopt those evidence-based interventions to the needs of the individual who is sitting in front of us or who is with us. And that is the sensibility that a professional is expected to have.
That's where the whole personalized program
Absolutely.
kind of comes into play.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I think being part of the team who leads a really large team of mental health professionals, being in this field for about 28 years, I would leave these top 3 things that every family member, every recovering individual needs to do. If your mental health professional is not ready to have a conversation with you and give you a roadmap of what next and allow you to explore the place, you may be making a decision, you may be taking a decision, you may be taking that step which is not constructive. Recovery really starts with the right assessment, and we are now still talking about where does the evidence-based program fits into. Now, who are these team of mental health professionals that people do refer to? There is something beyond a psychiatrist. There is a need for a clinical psychologist, there's a need for a counselor, there's a need for psychiatric social workers, dedicated team of family therapists, support staff of nurses, physicians. So here is a whole gamut of services that we offer, and we are extremely proud about, and that's one of the reasons why we're putting out these conversations, so that the pessimism that surrounds around alcoholism and alcohol addiction can be shown in the right way, and there is real science to these treatments. This is one question, Dr. Sunil, I would love to get your views. Is there crisis in alcoholism or alcohol addiction? Should a family be shy enough to say that there is a crisis? I have had somebody doing this over and over again. I don't know where to reach out. And how should, as families or as an individual, they should manage crisis?
Absolutely. When we are talking about a crisis in a general medical front, it's very easy that if somebody is unconscious, yes, it's a crisis. Somebody's broken his bone, it's a crisis, it's an emergency. But when it comes to alcohol issues, or for that matter, the general, broader, psychological issues, when do you consider it to be a crisis? Because it's a threshold that unfortunately the family has. So for some families, a minor issue could be a crisis. For some families, a major issue can be a crisis. Otherwise, they generally try to manage. But we need to recognize that there is something called a crisis or an emergency when there is a problem related to alcohol. Here I would like to categorize them into 2 different broader aspects or spaces there. One is the person has taken alcohol and he's completely intoxicated.
Right.
And he's intoxicated to an extent that he is knocked out and he's not responding. And people, when they take alcohol, many of them have the habit of not having food regularly, which can lead to hypoglycemic episodes, the sugar levels dropping, or if the physical health is not good, they might have passed out. That's one crisis, which is purely a medical crisis, when people have the habit of rushing them to the general hospital and going to the emergency department, where the medical problem is addressed and they're said, you have got alcohol problem, you go, and he goes back and again he drinks alcohol. That's one. Second, under the influence of alcohol, this is where the issue or the gray area that comes in. He's behaving abnormally.
Right.
Okay. And when he's behaving abnormally, what do the family do? Okay. Do they tolerate? Do they just bear with the behavioral problems that this individual, he could be physically abusive, he could be verbally abusive, or he could be just going out and spoiling their name and speaking, creating whole havoc at their social situation. That is also, and that should also be considered as a crisis where they have to seek mental health professionals' help. As I said, in the second, the former one, it's the tolerance levels of the family, and also probably the socioeconomic strata of the family also comes into picture, and each one have their own way of dealing with it, and they manage.
So I'm sure a larger section of them really manifest and land up with other medical specialties as well, right? Could be gastroenterology, general medicine, and sometimes the emergency wards as well. I think under the abuse of driving and multiple other incidents that really happen. I think one very, very specific outline I think both of us need to address is what happens really in a rehabilitation center, and how is the whole recovery process? I mean, is there an end in the rehabilitation residential program, and is there a start to another program after that? I think we should throw light on those lines.
Absolutely. I think we are known for rehabilitation, and even after 28 years of being in various domains, spaces, super specialties of psychiatry, professionals and people, community, they recognize us for being the best rehab center. And that is certainly we are known for it, and we are best at that. There is no doubt about that. So in the rehab, first thing, when the individual enters into our rehab, the psychiatrist, they evaluate the physical health part of it, the biological part of it, to assess what amount and what kind of biological support, medical support that this individual needs. Some people might have severe withdrawals. This is what we call a detoxification, where the person is going through a phase where the body is reacting for not getting the substance that the body was used to earlier. So this individual is supported with certain medications for a shorter period of time, so that this phase can be as smooth and as comfortable as it can be. Because many individuals, this withdrawals itself becomes a primary reason for them to go back and again take alcohol. So we help them with that. Along with that, whatever the physical health issues this individual has will have to be recognized, addressed by those specialists. If it is liver-related issues, gastroenterologist. If it is more of other physical health issues, the general medicine specialists. Along with this, the psychiatrist will also look for the psychiatric reasons why this individual is taking alcohol. Right. Is there an underlying depression? Is there an underlying mood disorder? Or is there an underlying other psychiatric conditions like maybe ADHD or various other reasons? Or because of taking alcohol, has this individual developed any psychiatric comorbid conditions? Unless we address both, there is never a solution.
Right.
That is the first part of it. Second, a clinical psychologist and the counselors address the individual psychological domain. trying to understand who this person is. Okay, so this is something which has been the philosophy, that one is the problem. The label is alcoholism, the label is alcohol dependence syndrome, but there is an individual who is going through this problem, and there is a person who is having this problem. And who is that person who is going through that problem? That becomes very, very important. For an example, if somebody has headache is common, but a coffee relieves headache for somebody, paracetamol relieves for somebody, sleep relieves somebody, because the individual who is going through the problem is different there, right, though headache is the common thing. So how the body responds, how the person is looking at the problem becomes extremely important, and that is the domain that the clinical psychologists and counselors look at it. They help him in looking at their coping strategies. It could be the cues management. It could be the cognitive behavior therapies. If the person is in a denial that I do not have any problem, if I want to leave this alcohol, I can leave it, then there are therapies like motivational enhancement therapy, or initially the motivational interview. There are a lot of evidence-based psychological interventions that are available. Whatever is relevant and suitable to that particular individual, those therapies are picked, and those therapies are administered or supported to that particular individual, both by counselor and clinical psychologist. Along with this, in alcohol-related issues, one of the important effects that an individual will have is when their own peers, people who take this alcohol, if he interacts with them, tries to understand what they have gone through and how they are perceiving the problem, if this person understands, the impact would be much more. So we have evidence-based group interventions, which are again conducted by the specialists. It can be as diverse as a psychoeducation group, where we are talking about helping the individual understand what this alcoholism is, alcohol problems are, what are the complications, physical health issues, other issues that this alcohol can cause. That's one. Two, a very focused an expressive group, or a cognitive behavior group, or a mindfulness-based interventions group. This is the second part that happens in the psychological domain, which is again structured during their stay in a residential rehabilitation. While medical issues are taken care by the psychiatrist, the psychological part is addressed at an individual level. Second, at the group level, the person is also encouraged to have good lifestyle, right, changes in the lifestyle, be it yoga, be it, spending time in the fitness where we have a gym, or it could be spending time, going around the center, walking track, walking, or games, playing outdoor games or indoor games, where the person explores alternate pleasurable activities. He recognizes that it's alcohol, just not the alcohol which can give me the pleasure. There are many other things in life which I need to explore. So that's the other thing that will be happening. When this is happening, this journey is happening, the psychiatric social workers gets involved in assessing the family structure, interpersonal issues that this person is having, and those domains are also looked into and supported with.
Right. So while we're talking about at the end of a rehabilitation or inpatient treatment or a rehabilitation treatment, we extensively talk about post-care treatment options. We talk about support while we reintegrate them into mainstream. To me, it is really about hand-holding their reintegration. If we could put it down into one statement, that's where our post-care services stand out. How does a clinician look at it? What do we also, our clinicians, do they also have some expectation from the recovering individual when they're on post-care on how long is this really recovery? I mean, I know there is recovery at an inpatient stage. So as a general assumption, it's about give yourself milestones and say if you've achieved that. But then how long is really recovery?
I think before we dwell into how long recovery is, I think we need to make things clear when we say recovery. What do we mean by recovery? the general notion is recovery means if the individual has alcohol problem, stopping the alcohol is the recovery, is the general perception that individuals have. But from a medical point of view, when we talk about recovery, we don't mean that the person has recovered when he stops taking alcohol. No. Recovery is a journey, okay, where despite the individual having problems because of alcohol or maybe associated to alcohol, we accept that and we help the person go through a normal life where we are looking at larger aspects of well-being. Coming back to, is rehabilitation and is an end in itself, and then recovery starts from the day the person steps out of the rehabilitation center? The answer is no.
So the day he decides to take help is the first day of
yes, the day he decides and the day he starts approaching problem as a problem, I think the recovery has started there. And rehabilitation is not a procedure, or it is not an intervention that I begin something and I end something. It is not like a surgical procedure where I remove something and after 10 days, 15 days, the person is out of it. It's a journey that the individual should be ready. It's a journey the family should be ready. It's a journey that, of course, the professionals are there. That's their, that's what they are trained for. So a rehabilitation is a journey, and rehabilitation center that they stay in, it's the beginning. It is not an end. By staying in a rehabilitation center for a month or even for 3 months, it is not that the person has transformed. No. The transformation has begun by staying in the rehabilitation center with the help of the professionals, and he needs to continue to seek, continue to take that professional help so that he can continue to be away from the alcohol if that is the wish, or reduce or minimize the problems that is associated with alcohol. So that is where the post-care that comes in, and it is absolutely the most essential one. And as clinicians, I think that is what they would be looking for, because they would be the first people to recognize that just a stay of a month or 3 does not end anything. It is a beginning.
Interesting. So, who is to be blamed for a relapse or lapse? I took some time to understand this concept of lapse, that lapse really meant, you just slipped once or twice and not really a full-fledged you went back to the same behavioral pattern. But then who's to be blamed for relapse, or should nobody be blamed for relapse? Is it part of the recovery? I'm sure the loved ones would always love to know this. And who doubles up there? What role do they play?
So it's very interesting that recently one of our patients, while he was stepping out of the de-addiction center, Anunita, he was saying that this is a relapsing type of a problem. That means recovery happens with the death. Okay, so that is what is the conclusion, or that is what is the understanding that he has got, that lifelong I would be recovering. So complete recovery happens at the time of death only. Otherwise, it can relapse any time. So the answer to that is, if somebody has had a fever or some infection, is it that he will never get it? Yes, he has come out of the problem. He can get that infection, or he can get the fever, or he can get back that problem anytime in his life. Is that a relapse? It is a relapse. It is, again, the illness that has come back to that particular individual without doubt. But what is the problem that we are looking at? This alcohol problem, the very definition of alcohol problem, understanding of the alcohol problem is, it is a relapsing and remitting type of problems that we are from a biological point of view, because there are no medications, medicines which can 100% help the individual. If there is a lapse or if there is a relapse, who is responsible for it? It is the problem which is responsible for it. It is neither the individual, it is not the family. They might be the contributory factor for the relapse, and relapse is not a setback. Okay, relapse is part of the recovery journey that individual has to go through. If there is a relapse, there is even more need for introspection from both the professionals who are helping that individual. Second, the individual himself, that I have relapsed in spite of taking the best treatment. So what is it that I have to make changes with? Okay, and win this problem, which is possible, and people can recover. People can come out of the problem. It is not that it is not.
So, Dr. Sunil, I think we've spoken at breadth about this, right? Now, the day we, as individuals, we accept that this is a medical problem and this is an illness, there's a certain level of recognition for the recovering individual. There's a certain responsibility of the family members, and there's also a responsibility of the society to say that, hey, listen, we look at it as an illness. Now, when we talk about reintegration for an individual who's been with alcoholism or alcohol dependence syndrome, the bigger problem, can he live with it? Can he be as functional as he was before, or before he slipped into this problem? During his recovery phase, can he work? Can he resume his education? Our belief is he should be able to. What would be those quick tips to say that how should one accept to live with it, and what all do they need during the course of recovery?
There is one misnomer, or people have one of the misunderstandings that there is something called functional addict. Okay, this is again, I personally got to know from a patient who was recovering from our rehab center. He said that there is something called a functional addict, and I would like to be a functional addict. Okay, I asked him, what is this functional addict all about? He said, I can work, I can do my normal activities of life and continue to take the drug or the substance or alcohol, whatever I am taking, because I am functional. Okay. So is that something which is appropriate? I don't know. I mean, I personally, I have reservations with that, but from a pure clinical point of view, for us to diagnose, for us to kind of treat, he has to fit into the two categories that we generally talk about. Whether this individual has abuse or harmful use, if this person has dependent syndrome that we are talking about. If it is not there, okay, it becomes a challenge medically to say, should he not take the treatment? I think that is the core of the question that I think you brought about. Yeah. That I can work, I can do things, but I do take alcohol. What is the problem? Okay, so it's a very dicey situation there, probably a very gray area where neither the medicine nor I think the law has any solution.
So I also want to draw out a message to say that I am not the illness, but I live with the illness. That's something that
absolutely.
You could look at the way forward. I have this whole aspect, right? One clarity is for sure that you can't just have a person in closed walls and say, have different belief mechanisms and say the person is going to recover. So that's a certainty of a no. But now I have a question, which is, A as clinicians, B as families, C as recovering individuals, do they really need swimming pools and spas in a de-addiction center? Or do they have really any role apart from complementing it and just to bring the leisure in?
See,
I would love to hear out your NHS, exposure, the programs that we're working on, and from the best of the world, not really the local context here.
Absolutely. We just spoke about evidence-based interventions. Okay. So when we strictly talk about evidence-based, is there a study, is there an evidence to say that a person needs these kind of luxury amenities for recovery, from a medical point of view or even from a psychosocial context, the answer would be no. But the duration of the stay, the individual who is otherwise, if you just take the substance out, the alcohol out of that individual, he's like anybody else. When we ask him to be away from that particular substance and go through a change, it becomes extremely challenging for that individual to stay in a controlled environment, both from a medical point of view, plus also from a psychological point of view, to stay away. And in that stage, to help the individual be as comfortable as he can, these amenities certainly helps them. These amenities certainly makes their stay much more pleasant, much more comfortable. If I'm not stretching it too much, it is very well known that good physical activity is known to help any individual with any kind of psychological issues or the substance use problems, including alcohol that we are talking about. So if there are facilities or amenities where he can spend considerable amount of time, where he is physically active, be it swimming, be it outdoor activities that we have ourselves, where our patients or the residents who are undergoing de-addiction program are encouraged to be physically active, be it fitness center, they certainly have an impact, but they are all complementary. They supplement the overall recovery, but they cannot be the core focus of overall treatment.
So now with amenities, lifestyle is really is a subjective aspect, right? When it comes to the focus on staying in a controlled environment and focus on being there for what they're there for, a lot of emphasis in our conversation and as an organization that we emphasize on is the professionals, the medium of care, the approach that we've gone on to adapt. As a family member, as a recovering individual, if we were to give them 3 or 4 or 5 top quick checklists that they really need to go down to and say, these are my pointers to which I will make this decision, and these are what I will always reflect back upon, or things that I should bear in mind, what would those be? I mean, that could be how many ever, but what would those be? I mean, I have a few pointers. We'll conclude with that.
Sure. I'd just like to add to the previous question that you had raised. We are collaborative partners with one of the largest trusts of the UK, the CNTW, NHS Foundation Trust, where it was a surprise that they manage the entire addiction services in community, that is at home. Okay. So they don't even have any kind of centers. Okay, they are able to manage things in the community. Okay, which has been extremely a wonderful and enriching thing for us to take it back and for us to learn. So they do not have this swimming pools, they do not have anything, but still they're able to help the individual. Of course, that's a public funded, or it's like a government institution where they will have limitations. So when we are talking about pure evidence-based, these have limitations. But if we are able to offer them, like how we have in our own de-addiction center, I think the stay and things would be much more comfortable. So to the last question of what would be the checkpoints for a family member, when in doubt, I mean, this is the bottom line that I feel everybody should have. When in doubt, do not Google, Okay, please consult a professional, and there are professionals, and we are always open as an organization, and we have professionals who are always open. How much ever silly or minor the question may be, okay, you can walk in and talk to. Second, we have an entire dedicated team of triage psychologists. I don't think there is any organization in this country which has got professionals doing the triaging work. Okay, unless you enter into an emergency department of a hospital, you will have a triage specialist, they're emergency physicians, but not over the phone. I think we are the first one to have. Please call our helplines or our board lines. You will be spoken to, you will be addressed, you will be helped by the professionals who are qualified to do. Okay. Third, if there is a problem in the different domains, physical health issues, the person behavioral issues are there, he is no more able to fulfill the roles, there is a change in his routine, his or her routine that he used to, there is any change in the normal pattern, behavioral pattern of an individual, that is the first thing. If you are recognizing, do not hesitate. Okay, there is it is not a taboo to meet a counselor, psychologist, or a psychiatrist. Fourth, if you are taking alcohol, even if you are confident that I am just an user, I just take while I go to parties, you might not know how frequently you are going to parties. Okay, so please, if you get ever doubt, or if any one of your family members tell you that your drink has quantity or the frequency has increased, just walk in to our centers, any of the centers, or call our helpline. Our people will help you out. There are certain user-friendly self-administrable scales that is there. Again, they can log into our website, and we have those scales online there.
Yep.
They can check.
Yep.
That will also help them understand if at all they have got problem or no problem. And of course, when there are major issues like dependence or abuse, naturally it is very evident and very noticeable.
Yep.
And they have to seek the help of the professionals.
Yeah. So, I think to sum things up, is it fair to say there is a thin line of difference between an issue, problem, and an illness? And so is to do with alcoholism and alcohol addiction. Whenever you are in doubt, whatever pattern of usage it is, so this issue, problem, and illness, maybe Dr. Google does not have the answers. Call in on the triage, call in on the helpline. What you would be met with is as a professional screening. What you will be met with is care options. What you will be met with is what next for each one of you all who have heard to us, either till the end or as per different sections. Thank you for hearing us out. Thank you, Dr. Sunil.
Thank you, Sandesh.
It was a good conversation.
Thank you. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you.